What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Episode 41. I'm trying something different this week. I don't know if it's going to work. We'll see what happens. I'm recording this at the end of the day on Thursday. It has been a very busy day today, lots of client-facing work, which means I'm feeling very energized in one sense, and my brain is also at its limit in another. But I wanted to try recording these on a Thursday after I finish working with clients rather than on a Friday, so that I've got Friday to edit and get it all uploaded. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how much editing this needs once I finish recording. But I am back with 3 light bulbs from my client work this week. As I said, it's been a good busy day today. We did the workshop on leadership habits and burnout, covering off 4 different habits that can lead to burnout, and then covering 4 different habits that can actually help reduce burnout, not just for you as leaders, but for your team as well. If you missed that, but you registered, I have sent you an email so you can find out where to access the recording. And if you would like to come along to one of the free workshops, there's another one next Wednesday. So next Wednesday, I will be covering my PIPS framework. This will be as a bit of an introduction into the Elevate Your Efficiency program, because the next cohort starts in September. And I know some of you are interested, but you might not have worked with me before. So this is a great opportunity for you to dial into a workshop, see what happens, see what it's like to work with me, be in the room with me, and then you can make a decision about joining the next cohort. Of course, if you've already decided you want to be on the next cohort, then the doors are open. You can simply head to the website to get yourself signed up. So, light bulbs this week are coming from today's workshop and also from one-to-one sessions. So light bulb 1, this has a bit of a crossover because we talked about rescuing rather than coaching or co-creating in the workshop today. And then this came up in a one-to-one session later on. We were talking through values, we were talking through boundaries, we were talking through how they like to work. As we were talking through something that they had experienced this week, they identified that the dreaded drama triangle was at play. Their boss, with the best of intentions, had recognized that they were very busy, but had made the assumption that they were too busy to get involved with a task. And rather than asking and approaching the individual, they took this task on, thought they were doing the best thing, thought they were helping. However, because they made an assumption and because they jumped in and rescued, this put them in the villain position, because they didn't have that conversation with my client. They didn't ask my client if that's what they wanted them to do. They jumped in, they rescued, they did the task themselves. And that goes against how my client likes to work. It goes against their values, and it goes against the things that they want to protect and preserve. And in doing that, they put them into the victim position. So my client didn't go to them as a victim. And actually, if they had approached them and had that conversation, then it might have played out very differently. This was a great example of somebody doing something with the best of intentions, but ending up in the villain role and creating a victim in the process. We talked about this in the workshop today, and several people said the same thing. They want to help, they want to be supportive, they want to be there for their teams. However, this is such a great example of when the best of intentions has unintended consequences. And so sometimes that act of kindness lands as a disrespect. And we really need to be aware of that. Now, this has all been resolved. They've had a conversation. My client has been able to communicate what it was about that action that resulted in them feeling a certain way. And so their boss understands where the disconnect was. They understand that, yes, they recognize it was an act of kindness that had unintended consequences. It has been resolved. The reason why I'm raising this as the first light bulb, firstly, because the number of people who mentioned today that they are working on rescuing less as a leader and how they can support their teams in a different way, that means that they are coaching, that they are co-creating, that they are challenging rather than rescuing. But also, how many times have we done that where the individual hasn't felt comfortable or confident enough to raise that with us? And I know I've talked about this before because I had a client last year who talked about wanting to work on being aggressively helpful. And when they first mentioned it, I've not heard that term before. What do you mean by that? And they just said, I really like to help. I really like to help. I really like to be supportive. That's one of my values. However, sometimes I overstep and I jump in and I'm almost aggressively offering to help. And so people who don't know me very well or people who report into me who are respecting my authority, let me take over because they don't feel comfortable or confident in challenging me and saying, I'm okay, I've got it, like it's okay. So this is where some of our great characteristics, our great attributes can become a negative. And we need to increase our awareness around that. We need to challenge how often we jump in and rescue, but we also need to challenge that awareness to make sure that our good intentions are landing with our teams as we want them to. The challenge here is that the fastest way to undermine someone's capability is to hand them the finished answer, assume that they don't know, or assume that they are not capable of solving the problem that they have. Sometimes people just want to bounce it around. Sometimes people have an answer in mind. They just want some reassurance that that is the right way to move things forward. Or they're not asking for permission. They're being considerate. They're sharing it with us because they think that we should know or we should be in the picture. So we need to really check in with what it is that individual wants before we jump in to help, because sometimes that help is not as helpful as we think it is or as we would like it to be. So we know we've got great instincts to help, to step in and to fix. That's not necessarily what support looks like. So this is the question for you to take away from Lightbulb 1. What does support look like at the level that you are now in? And what does that support look like when you are not fixing or rescuing? If you think about some of the things that you have supported your staff with this week, could you have done it differently? Could you have approached it in a different way that would still be supportive, but also support them in the long term too? Okay, so that's Lightbulb 1. Lightbulb 2, this is your reminder that nobody arrives at senior leadership fully formed. Nobody is fully ready. The key thing with leadership is that there isn't an end point. Even when we get promoted, we're still evolving. We're not arriving as this final version. And we need to give ourselves the grace that we often give our teams, especially when we are new at something. And for a lot of you, even if you've been in your role for a little while, even if your last promotion was a little while ago, you're still going to be taking on things that are new to you. And we need to remember that we're not a finished product. We're not fully formed. We are still evolving. We are still a work in progress. Now, we might be sitting in rooms with people who have learned to carry themselves really well. They've learned how to communicate confidently. They've learned how to command that presence in the room. That doesn't mean that they know what they're doing all of the time. You cannot compare yourself to what other people are presenting. In the same way, there are probably a huge number of occasions where you present yourself really well. And at the same time, that whole entire internal dialogue is, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't feel prepared. I'm winging it. And yet what your team see is a confident, self-assured person who knows exactly what they're doing. So we cannot compare what we see with what we feel, because there will be a big disconnect. It was something that came up in a client session where we talked about comparison. And that is a challenge. I know everybody says don't do it. We are still going to do it. The challenge is that we have to catch ourselves when we do it and make sure that we are reflecting on our own journey and our own development with the level of self-compassion that we show to others. Because we are our own worst critics. We give ourselves a super hard time, but we would never talk to our team like this. We need to make sure that we give ourselves that grace to make mistakes and get things wrong, but we do that in a way that is helpful, that when we reflect on our learning experiences, that we look at the whole picture, not just the bit that went wrong. We look at the whole picture and we step back and we look at everything that happened and where we contributed and where we might do things differently in the future. There will always be learning. There will always be opportunities to develop, and there will always be an evolution. If you haven't been told that it is okay to still be learning at the level that you are at, then you can take it from me. You can hear it from me that you are still okay to make mistakes. You are still okay to not know, and you are still okay to make one decision, get more information, and then realize that there's a better decision that can be made, and to make a different decision. It is okay. It is okay to still be learning. It's okay to still be growing. And it is still okay to have areas of your leadership where you don't feel as confident. And it is still okay to show up confidently, even when there's an internal dialogue that is asking you a number of questions. It is normal. It's normal at a tactical leadership level. It's normal at an operational level. And it is still normal at a strategic leadership level. It's good to have that level of self-awareness. It's good to ask those questions. It's good to recognize where there's a learning and where you can be better and where you can show up differently. Do that with a sense of perspective and rationale. If you have contributed to good things, make sure that those are recognized as well. If you have also made decisions that went really, really well, then recognize that. Take the learning, but allow yourself some praise at the same time. Your feedback to yourself needs to be just as balanced as the feedback that you give your team. We are all a work in progress. Everybody is a work in progress. Okay, Lightbulb 3. This is something that I am going to invite you to pay attention to in your one-to-ones and in your conversations with your team. This is something that happened in a client session this week. It's one of those weeks where I've had 3 new clients, which is great. And with any client, even when we've been working together for a while, I'm paying attention to the words. I'm paying attention to how they structure what they're saying. I'm also paying attention to body language, to their tone, to their pace, how they're moving around when they're talking about things. And I know that those of you who have worked with me will know this because I name it when I see it. I describe it when I see it. And that's quite often what sparks a different conversation and starts to shift different perspectives. And I love that about one-to-one sessions because we can get into that detail. And this was a client who was talking about not feeling very motivated at work. And it was very apparent in their body language. Their energy was very flat. The answers to the questions were very measured. It was all kind of, it's all right. there was no real excitement, even though they were very ambitious. They clearly had some plans of things that they wanted to achieve in the company that they were in. Now, when we started talking about things outside of work and balancing work and life, they started talking about some personal plans that they've got. I won't talk about what those were just to protect the client's confidentiality, but they've got some big things going on in their personal life. And when we started to talk about that, the shift was very apparent. You don't need the training that I've done to have been able to have seen the energy shift that took place. Now, interestingly, when I called it out, they hadn't noticed it. So I guess for me, it seemed like it was very obvious. For them, they hadn't noticed it. But when I called out their change of energy, they were quite surprised. They hadn't noticed that it had happened. And this is what I wanted to talk about as the third light bulb. When people tell you what motivates them, don't just listen to the words. Watch what happens in their body while they're describing it to you. This individual had talked about being successful at work, getting ahead at work. The body language only changed when they started talking about something else outside of work that motivated them. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're contradicting themselves, that they weren't motivated in work. What it actually meant, because we dug into this a little bit deeper, was that they wanted to be successful. They had a plan. They wanted to get ahead. They were ambitious. What they didn't have was a plan. And what they didn't have was the support from their own manager to implement that plan. And the difference between their work ambition and their personal ambition was having a plan to follow. So although they had ambitions for promotion in work, it wasn't apparent that it was going to be able to happen. It wasn't any indication that they could make it happen. And they didn't have any support in place of their line manager sitting down with them to say, okay, this is the pathway. This is what we can do. These are the steps that we can take. This is the plan to follow. Whereas they had that for their personal life. So the difference wasn't the level of motivation. The difference was having a plan that they could be enthusiastic about that would motivate them to show up and implement what was in that plan. And that's what we talked about in the session. And that's what helped them to see things a little bit differently and for them to go away to create that plan, something that would drive that enthusiasm, that would help them to light up and get excited about the different steps on the plan. When you're talking to your staff, when you're talking with your teams, when you want to know what's really driving someone, listen for the answer, watch for the energy shift. You'll see it. The expression is right there. What lights people up, you'll see. Their body language will change. Their eyes light up. The answer comes with a different level of energy. People lean forward. When they're talking about things that they're really excited about, you'll see them lean forward as if they're trying to move into it. And when they're trying to avoid something, they'll quite often lean back as if they're trying to avoid it. Now, that's not one size fits all, but definitely something to watch out for. But when you're talking to your team, when you're in your one-to-ones and you're asking them questions about their self-development, look to see what their body language is telling you as much as the words that they are using. See what lights them up. See what they're getting excited about. And be okay with being curious. Ask them more questions. Tell them what you notice. And see how that adds to the conversation and what else that brings into the conversation. Okay, those are my 3 light bulbs for this week. I don't know how much editing is going to be needed, but hopefully by the time this reaches you, there will be less stumbling and it will be another smooth podcast episode. We'll see. There's 3 light bulbs in there, so that will mean at least one action that you can take away. Now you know what you know. What will you commit to? Remember, keep it small, keep it simple, keep it specific. That's how overwhelmed leaders become intentional leaders. And I'll see you next week on The Lightbulb. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.